In this video, what I want to do is go through 7 powerful Lightroom tips that you might not know. Morning everybody, fantastic to see you all again. Well, I'm a bit excited at the moment because I've got a pre-production copy of the Z7 II and also the 14 to 24mm lens, which is a lens that I've been looking forward to trying for a long time. So I'm looking forward to trying that out, and there will be a video out on the Z7 and 2 years of using the Z7 and what I think of the Z6 and Z7 as well. In fact, this video is being filmed on the Z6 II, so it'd be interesting to see if the focusing's improved and there's no hunting. So this is all about Lightroom and some of the more powerful things that I use in Lightroom I've used for a long time. Some of them are new as well in the newest version of Lightroom, and they're things that I feel that maybe a lot of people might not know about. Some of them you may, some of them you may not. So I want to sort of give you some examples of how I use Lightroom and these particular tools and tips to edit my photos. And I'm also, at the end of the video, going to announce the winners from the competition for 250,000 subscribers. So stick around for that. There's 3 prizes and I'll announce the winners of those at the end of the video. So the first tip is all about brushes and using brushes in your editing. And it's something that I do all the time. I dodge and burn with brushes, and you know, it's just a really good way of just tweaking small parts of your image. I used to do it back in the darkroom days when I used to process black and white photos, and that time I used to have tools to dodge and burn the light going from the enlarger onto the paper, but now it's much easier to do in Lightroom. So I've got an example here. This is a photo that I took in the Faroe Islands. You can see we've got a bit of snow coming down, some amazing light. And one of the things I want to do is I just want to bring out some of the textures in this mountain here. So I can go to the brush tool here, and then I can go and just paint in some effects. Now, one of the things, first thing to know is if you just double click on the effect, it resets the tool. So it does the same for a graduated filter or a radial filter as well. So what I've done, and the tip here, is to create presets for your brushes. So I've got just a small number of presets that I use to be able to go and change parts of my image. So for this one, I know here I'm going to want to do a dodge no color preset, and what this does is it adds a bit of contrast, adds some whites and shadows, and I might want to tweak it afterwards, but it's a good starting point, add a bit of clarity. And then I can just reduce my brush size. It sets the flow to about 41. The flow is how much of that actual effect is going to show. And if you keep brushing it, then you get more and more. It's almost like getting a paintbrush and just brushing more onto it. It gets denser and denser the more you do. And what I want to do is I just want to increase this area here. So I'm just going to brush this on nice and easily. And I'm just going to maybe do it one more time, and that's just going to slightly improve that a little bit. And if you look at that before and after, I can just delete that. You can see that's before, that's after, and that brush tools really help me bring out some details here. Now, another top tip is just click O to see where it's applying to, and if you want to tweak it, then you can do that really easily. So here's another image that I could do it to. So this was an image that I shot recently in the woodland. It was foggy and got some autumn colours. I really like this. This is now a print on my portfolio on my website, so you can go and check that out. And maybe what I want to do is I want to bring out some of the detail here on this bark, and I've got a preset which I could do this all the time with trees. It's a bring out bark preset. I just want to resize my brush here, and then what I want to maybe do is paint in down that bark. Now, because it's a straight edge, there's a super top tip here. If I just click the brush once there, I can click the shift button now and do it right to the bottom of the tree, and because it's straight, it creates a straight line there. So that's a good way of just using brushes on straight lines. If you've got a horizon or if you've got some buildings or something like that, that can make a really big difference. And then I can just, you know, if I want to, just hand do it as well. And what this does, this bark preset, is just bring out some of the contrast in the bark. Again, if I just delete that, you can see that it's just pulled out just a bit of texture, a bit of contrast in that bark area, and I find it a really good way of just improving my tree or woodland photos. It's just a really good way of doing that, and then you can tweak it afterwards if you want to. So whilst we're on brushes and filters, let's go on to the graduated filter, because there's a top tip for this as well. So this here is a shot that I took in Glencoe, and what I want to do is I just want to increase the contrast and the drama in the sky. It's already fairly dramatic, but it was so rainy, it was so dark, the cloud. I want to really bring that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply a graduated filter to this. I'm just going to clear that effect, and then what I want to do is just darken the sky, and I want to add some contrast, and I want to maybe just increase the shadows a little bit, increase the whites a little bit. Probably going to darken it even more, about there. I'm going to darken the blacks, but what you can see is it's darkened the top of the mountain as well. And if we click O, we can see that it's applying to the mountain here. I don't want it to apply to the mountain. The easiest way to do this is just go to the brush tool, go to erase, and then click auto mask. And what that does is it helps you erase that effect and that mask just on the actual mountain here. So it creates a really good mask. So I've just got this set up now, and all I'm going to do is just make sure I'm careful still, but it will look at that edge, and it'll be a little bit, it'll help me out a little bit when I'm doing this, so that I don't go too much into erasing the actual mask on the sky and get a really horrible line. So I can go around here, not have to be as careful with it, because you know that it's going to help me out when I do this. Like that. And now I've got that effect applied to the sky, but not to the mountain. Now, I've probably overdone it a little bit there just to show you in this demo, but it is so useful that I use that auto mask all the time to arrange a mask when I'm using a graduated filter. So definitely try it. It makes a really big difference. Okay, we're going to stick on masks. This is the last tip with masks, but I think they're so useful. And what I want to do is just talk to you about range masks. Now, I will do a whole video on this at some point, but range masks are so useful. They allow you to choose a selection based on color or luminosity. So what I want to do maybe is just tweak this blue area here. And what I can do is I can just grab it with a radial filter here, but obviously that has actually selected the mountain and the snow in the foreground. So what I can do is I can go to the range mask, click color, and then just select some of the blue here, and that will now just select the blues within the image. Now if I didn't want to change the sky there, I could obviously brush out that mask in the sky, but what this allows me to do now is just tweak the color, or the I could make it a little bit more orange, I could make it a little bit, I could just tweak the color of that. I could also reduce the highlights, you know, shadows or whatever of that. So you can change colors within your image by using these range masks super easily. But there's an extra tip around this, and that is having the ability to create hue changes on an image. So for instance, in this one, if I wanted to change the hue of this water here, which is blue, I would usually just go down to the HSL slider, go to the blue slider and the hue, and I could change it, and that would change the color of the water. But what you can see here is it's also changing the color of the sky, and it's changing the color of the rainbow, which is not good in this case. You don't want that to happen. The rainbow's got to stay the same. You don't want to change the hues of the rainbow. But you can change the hue of this using a range mask, which is a lot of people probably don't know about, and it's quite a new thing within Lightroom. I can just create a graduated filter or even a radial filter, put it here. I'll just double click it to reset it, and then I can click a range mask, click color, choose the blues here. I'm just going to be rough and ready with this. You can see that I've now selected the sea here. I've also got some of the shadow detail here, but I'm not bothered about that. And then by changing the hue here, this will change the hue of just this blue lake here, but not the blue sky. So I can then just tweak the color of the blue in the water by changing this hue, which is super, super powerful. I mean, obviously we're not going to make it change it that much, but just making those small tweaks to individual parts of the images on a color basis can make a really big difference to how powerful that image is. Okay, on to the next tip, tip number 5, which is all about color grading and these new tools that have been added into Lightroom 10, which are really good. Before you could color grade the highlights and shadows, they've now added in the ability to color grade the midtones and give you a little bit more flexibility around the luminosity of those tones as well. And I have to say, it's such a brilliant tool to be able to just fine tune your images. So this is a woodland shot that I took. I've done some basic edits on it, and I'm going to be talking more about this in probably next week's video actually, when I was in this woodland and how I took this shot. But what I want to do is I just want to tone the highlights and the shadows a little bit. So what you can do is you can go down to this color grading here and you can tone the midtones, the shadows and the highlights. So the things that you need to know and the top tips for this really are some of the keyboard shortcuts, because with these keyboard shortcuts it makes it slightly easier to do it. So you need to know Shift and Command. Command allows you to choose a hue and then Shift allows you to fine tune the saturation of that hue, and it's much easier than just dragging it to where you want on the color wheel I found. So what I do is I drag it roughly to about there, say, and then I press Command, which is Control on Windows, and I fine tune it. So I want it to be sort of a yellowy green, the highlights on this. And then once I've got that, I can press Shift and it doesn't change the color, it just changes the saturation. So I can say, okay, how much saturation do I want there? So I actually in this case want quite a bit. And then I want to do the same with the shadows. So I'm going to tone them a little bit blue. And then again with the Shift key, when I've got the right blue, I can just fine tune that. And then if I think I've got the right saturation, I just want to fine tune the color, I can press the Command key and fine tune the color. So those keys are really useful. The other good thing with this new update is being able to do the midtones. Now, I don't do the midtones a huge amount, but I think you can just, so in this case, I think just adding a little bit of warmth to those midtones helps. So I'm just going to add that there. And then I'm also on the midtones, I'm just going to darken them down a little bit. Now that is something that is really useful. So I can just darken those midtones down. And then I'm just going to brighten the highlights. And then the blending and balance are two really useful tools as well. So blending is the amount of shadows, highlights and midtones that are blended together so they're overlapping. So you can have more or less of that. I usually just increase that a little bit. And then the balance is, are you just going to concentrate on the shadows or concentrate on the highlights? So if I go down to the shadows, it's going to make the shadows tones go across the whole range of tones, or if I go all the way to the right, it's going to make the highlight tones go across the whole range of tones. So on this particular image, I just want to push those highlights a little bit more. So I'm just going to move that to the right. And there we go, I've toned that image. It just gives you that extra little bit of control to just make your images super special. So definitely check out color grading and remember those keystrokes. Okay, the next one is a little bit around the color tools as well, but is around black and white and something that you might not know about, which is really useful. So if I convert this image into black and white, just click black and white up there, then you can control effectively what filters you're putting in front of it to control the density of the color tonal ranges within that image. Now you can just move these backwards and forwards and change things, but what I like to do is use this little picker here. And if you just click that picker on an area, then it will change those colours associated with that picker. It works really well when you click on the sky, and you can click on different parts of the sky. So for instance, I want to click here, and I just want to create a bit more contrast in the sky. So this is now just going to know that that's blue, and it's going to reduce the blue. I might click here and tweak it a little bit more, and then here it's going to tweak the oranges, the yellows and the oranges. So it's a good way of controlling your black and white photos quite quickly and just getting a feel for it, and then you can maybe fine tune them a little bit. So try that, use the picker when you're in black and white mode, and it can really help you create some really powerful black and whites. Okay, the next thing is about using Lightroom mobile, and in this case I've got my iPad and how I use my iPad, and that's around collections. So I've noticed a lot of people I speak to don't use collections very much. I use collections all the time, and what they allow you to do is sync specific images with Lightroom mobile and the Adobe Cloud, so that then you can get those images on your iPad or your iPhone. You can make adjustments to them when you're away from your computer, and those adjustments then get reflected obviously back into your Lightroom catalog. So for instance, in this case here, I had set up a catalog really easily. To do a catalog, you just have to select the images within Lightroom. It's really easy. So if I wanted to create a catalog, I would just go to a set of images. So if I just go to Q4 here and say, for instance, I go to some foggy images from Canic Chase here. So these are some images. I could select them all. So I could just go select all, go down here, click the collection button here and click create collection. And this will then include selected photos and sync with Lightroom. So I can just name that collection. And it's a really good way of going through your images when you've got back from a trip on your mobile or looking at those edits. So for instance, here I did one from the late autumn lakes, and I can go through these images, I can look at the images, and I can decide whether I like them or I don't like them. And I can also do some basic edits on them, or I could look at the ones that I've already flagged as picked. I could go into them and maybe tweak them. So in this one here, I could maybe think, okay, well that just needs to be a bit bluer, it's just a bit orange, or I could just do those final edits on my iPad. It's really, really useful. So if you've got an iPad, or even if you've got an iPhone, then I definitely recommend doing that. So the final thing is creating your own presets. I think it's so important to be able to have your own style within your photography. And if you can create your own presets, then it's a really easy way of, when you've edited a few photos and you think, oh, that looks good on that particular scene, then save them as a preset, and then you can apply those presets to photos when you're starting your edit, and you can get a feel for what they might look like. It also means that you start to develop a style a little bit more because you're using those presets all the time. Now, I don't think that you should just be completely a slave to those presets. You should, obviously every image has its own edit that you're going to tweak out of that preset, or some of your presets just may not work. But I think it's a good way of starting. I've got my own presets. If you're interested in those, then there'll be a link in the description. But to be honest, I wouldn't get my presets. I would create your own presets because you want to develop your own style. But these are my presets. I use them myself all the time. So for instance, on this one here, I think, okay, well, this will probably look quite good with a Lingmore Fell preset. And that just gives a color tone and a feel to the image that people will probably associate with my photos. And I think it's just a really good way of doing it. To create a preset, it's so simple. You just create your edit, whatever you've got here as your edit. You go over to the preset section here, and you just click the plus icon above presets, and you just create preset. And this will then create a preset from the edits, and you can decide whether you want to include everything or not. So obviously you're probably not going to include transformations in your preset. You might not include exposure in your preset because different photos are going to want different exposures, but shadows, highlights, things like that, tonal curves are things you're going to want to put in your preset. So I hope you've enjoyed those powerful Lightroom tips. There's certainly things that I wish I'd known earlier in my photography exploration, because they would have helped me. They're a really good way of creating some powerful images. Okay, so let's talk about the competition winners. We had so many entries. I was just blown away. But you had to be a subscriber, you had to like the video, and you had to leave a comment. So I looked at those people. I randomly selected 3 people that won. And those people are, for the first prize, I don't know whether there's a first, second, or third, but for one of the prizes, which is the case magnetic filters, that's Simon Godfrey. So well done, Simon. If you get in contact with me, just drop me an email or contact me through social media, then I'll make sure they're sent off to you. The print of your choice, so that's an A2 or A3 print of any of my portfolio, then that is Mary O'Neill. So well done, Mary. And the book, so my book Vistas, this book here, which is in its second edition at the moment, that's gone to Jack Cook. So well done, Jack. And thank you ever so much for everybody who sent some really fantastic messages, you know, of getting to 250,000 subscribers. I massively appreciate it. It's been such an amazing journey. And also thanks for the comments on last week's video where I was fairly honest and open about the reality of landscape photography and me running around like a headless chicken. It seems that everyone enjoyed that, so maybe I'll tell the truth a little bit more. Now, I do tell the truth. I always try and show you exactly how it is, but that was a particularly hectic morning. But I've got some really exciting videos coming, talking a little bit about gear. I'm going to mention more about my Z7 experience over the last 2 years. I get asked that a lot, so I'm going to talk about that. And I'm also going to do more in-field videos. I've recorded a few. I just need to edit them and share those. Thanks ever so much for watching, and until next Sunday, bye.